Now it's time for Viking Mail Call, a weekly show where you, the fans, get to ask the questions on your mind and have them answered by former Minnesota Vikings linebacker and coach, Pete Bercich. And now your host, Tom Moore.
Welcome, everyone, to Vikings Mail Call. I'm Tom Moore from VikeFans.com, and the one who seems to know what he's talking about football-wise is Pete Bercich. Well, Pete, we took a little extra time to do it, but the Vikings notched win number 3 of the season in Tampa Bay last Sunday. What were your thoughts on the win?
I think the defense turned the corner. That is what I think stands out to me in that kind of like against Buffalo. They played unbelievably well. You give up 225 yards to an NFL offense is almost unheard of. It's just fantastic. They got +2 in the turnover category. They played very, very well. The sacks keep on coming. They're number 2 in the NFL in sacks. Mm-hmm. We have a bunch of guys. We lost guys with big names. We didn't really gain a bunch of guys. So I thought the defense played very well. And for them to go out there, lose the coin toss, and then immediately into that overtime period, recover a fumble and return for a touchdown. These are the kinds of things that if the guys on the field, the players can buy into what they're actually saying. You always have the guy out there when the offense scores a field goal. They're the ones yelling, "Okay, that's enough. We don't need any more." That guy. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of lip service, but not a lot of people believe in that person. Well, now when the defense gets together and they talk about actually winning a football game on defense, it's going to mean a little bit more. More guys are going to buy into it. So hopefully it's going to continue to grow, and this momentum will continue to grow. And it's a momentum that builds on Sunday. A lot of guys see guys like Barr making big plays, so the rest of them want to get in there. I'm sure Harrison Smith wants to make more big plays. I'm sure Everson Griffin wants to make more big plays. They start studying film more. They start paying more attention to detail. They start buying into the system more. It builds steam is what it really does. We'll see how they play against Washington this weekend. RG3's coming back. Very mobile, athletic quarterback. Probably going to be a little bit rusty. We'll see if they can build. If you talk about my reaction to the game, I'm excited to see whether or not this defense has turned the proverbial corner. And again, let's not forget where they came from. Mm-hmm. Last in the league in scoring defense, 31 or 32nd in total yards. They have come a long way to win a game like they did last week. So I'm happy for that group. I'm excited to see what they have in store. I think they just keep playing better and better.
It's funny. I spend my attention back to May for the draft, and I remember all those Vikings fans saying, "What a wasted draft pick for Anthony Barr." They're not looking too smart right now, are they?
No, it's funny because I called that before it actually happened. But I thought they were going to take Barr as a defensive end. I thought that was going to be the role that he was going to fill. I didn't think for a minute he'd be able to play as an off-the-line linebacker like he has and play as well as he has, fundamentally. It's not an easy transition to go from a guy who plays on the line, defensive end, hand in the dirt, and to do that and become an off-the-line linebacker. It's exciting, too, because it means there's a lot of things in the way of technique he's still going to continue to learn and get better at. I think the sky's the limit. The kid's getting a lot of snaps. He had about 3 really good preseason games that he played, 8 regular seasons, so this is coming up to game 12, so it's kind of like an entire college season for him. Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure, you just got to keep an eye on that productivity and make sure he's not falling off the radar, because sometimes rookies, they get a little tired because it is such a long year. But, I don't know what more you can ask for out of the guy so far this season. He's just done an outstanding job. My hat's off to the coaching staff to get it, because I understand how hard it is to get a guy like that coached up. Yeah, I think right now a lot of times he's just kind of running around and hitting stuff. He's just blowing stuff up, everything that he can find, and he can't do that. So he's exceeded expectations in his ability to take on blocks because he's so tall. I thought the leverage part of it might be tough for him to get underneath blockers, but he's just so big. He's blowing people up in open field on screens. He's blowing up pulling guards. He's blowing up fullbacks. That type of physicality is rare these days. In a game, I think it's become bigger, it's become faster, but I think it's become a little less physical on average. He's out there just really laying the hammer on people.
Yeah, but it's funny because we talked to him at camp, and you won't find a more humble guy, but you got to love after the game, instead of talking about his winning score, the first thing he talks about is how he missed a pass that was sent to a receiver by a fingertip to put Tampa Bay ahead. You got to love that feeling of he wants to get better. He doesn't focus on just what he did good.
You're absolutely right. And my father played in the NFL. My dad was on the original Dallas Cowboy team. I know that Anthony's dad and his uncle both played in the NFL. I played with them in college, Reggie Brooks and Tony Brooks. When you grow up knowing that your dad accomplished it, it's kind of like, your dad's an accountant. Becoming an accountant is not really that big of a deal. You know what I mean? Your dad did it. So he brings some of that attitude, to the game. I think he keeps that in the back of his mind. And how refreshing is it to have a rookie that was drafted that highly, that's playing that well, and is not a chest pounder, is not shooting off at the mouth. I mean, in this day and age, it's just really refreshing to see, and that is why I think the kid's still going to continue to get better, because he's not doing those things. He's being serious, being humble, and continuing to work.
Yeah, well, this weekend, as you mentioned, the Vikings are back home against the Washington Redskins. But before we look at that game, Pete, I'd like to ask you if you recall October 18th, 1998, when you made your second NFL start at outside linebacker at the Metrodome against the Redskins.
Yeah, I remember that game clearly. That was Dwayne Rudd. Dwayne Rudd was injured. I think he hurt his shoulder. It was the first game coming out of a bye. I remember because Hunter Goodwin, Greg DeLong, myself, Matt Burke, we went up to Alexandria to go pheasant hunting over the bye weekend. It was pheasant hunting and fishing. Mm-hmm. And I remember we had, one of the nights was a very, very long night, if you will.
Yes.
And I just remember waking up the next morning, feeling the effects. And then I read the paper that I was starting that weekend. So,
yeah, but by the way, Pete, was that little Bible study that kept you up late? Is that what that was?
Exactly.
I got you.
Nothing like a little fellowship.
Sure.
So that's how I found out about it. I mean, you read, I pick up the paper, and I believe it was the Sunday paper the week before, when I'm up in Alexandria, Minnesota, after being out all night, and I'm thinking to myself, oh man, I gotta clean myself out here and get myself ready to go, because I got a game I gotta play in a week.
Well, clearly it was a great game, and you got to know, Pete, that we're running video while we speak in the background, so I have to ask you if you remember the near sack you got in the game and your almost fumble recovery. You remember those?
Yeah, well, that's kind of the story of my life. I'm, always I was always a step away, right? It was a lot of fun to start. It was a lot of fun to get a chance to play. I played in a lot of games. I mean, I would go in at 2 or 3 different positions for Eddie and for Dwayne, for Jeff Brady, maybe Dixon Edwards. I mean, I would get 15 to 20 snaps a game. But to get the start was fun. It was, and at home against the Redskins, it was. I know they were struggling at the time, so it wasn't as if like my first start in the NFL was against Barry Sanders against Detroit in Detroit. Talk about not sleeping too well the night before.
No kidding.
you got to chase that guy around the entire next day. So it was. When you get to be a little bit older and longer in the league, it was it was kind of plug and play. I mean, I had done enough and played enough, and I mean, you're only out. I mean, starting means you're out there for the first play. So, but I do remember the game. It was a lot of fun, and that was just such a great season, and to be part of it was a blessing.
Well, it was a great game for you. Actually, you ended up with 6 solos and 3 assists in the game on the tackle department. And I got to tell you, and it's playing right now, even a perfectly executed tackle on safety, Robert Griffith. Now, that's quite an overachiever for you. The look on his face is classic when he realizes he got tackled by you.
Hey, I mean, I was out there to hit anything. I didn't care what color it was, right?
I like it.
Maybe that, or I just had my eyes closed half the time.
Well, you mentioned that RG3 is back this weekend, and he will have some rust on him after being out for 7 games. What kind of defensive schemes would you expect Mike Zimmer to design to kind of keep that mobile ability he's got from picking apart the Viking defense with the scrambling?
Well, it's going to take a team effort, and by team effort, I mean the defensive line. There's a reason that they've garnered and gained the sacks that they have, and I think it's because you've got a group of guys that are playing together. It's not as difficult to get offensive linemen to play together as a unit. I mean, usually they grew up, as fat kids. They didn't have a lot of friends. They finally get to the NFL. They got buddies. They're all in the meeting room together. They stick together. They defend each other. we take 4 defensive linemen, and, you know, keep in mind, defensive linemen, they're almost all of them are ADHD. I've been in plenty of defensive line meetings. You can't keep their attention. They're hyper. They don't listen. They talk. I mean, to get a group like that, of individuals like that, to play together, you know, the way that they have is not an easy task. It's not an easy task for a coach to do, and you know, they've done a very good job of that. And I think the group of them know that they're all more productive, that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And how does that tie in this week? Well, RG3, you have to make him a pocket passer. I mean, the Redskins are going to do whatever they can to get him on the edge and let him use his athleticism. But when he's in the pocket and he becomes a pocket passer, he has not been as effective. He's effective when he can run the option, when he can do certain things with his legs. And let's face it, he's getting beat up for it. I mean, physically, not like in the media. He's literally getting beat up. And so he's going to want to make that transition. Coaches are going to want to see him make that transition. That's going to be the key. And you can't mess up for one play. That's the other thing. If you have a less mobile quarterback, you may let him out of the gate once or twice. You can't do that with RG3 because it could be 30, 40 yards every single time. Plus, you got a guy like Anthony Barr, who, if you put in a spy situation or let him be kind of the extra guy, has the speed to chase him down. So the matchup, I'm pretty comfortable with the matchup.
Oh, that's good. Well, over on the offensive side, you know, Teddy Bridgewater's making some strides, but he is struggling a little bit to find that touch and the accuracy on his deep passes. And Pete, you actually get to see him in pregame warm-ups before each game. And what does he need to change in his mechanics to start making those deep connections? And does he have the arm strength, for those of us who haven't seen him in person, to create that viable deep passing threat?
He absolutely has every bit of arm strength that you could possibly need. The thing with Teddy, and I look back, you know, I look in Tampa Bay and he still had that glove on, and I'm wondering if his hands were just sweaty that the glove actually hurt him, because he threw a couple deep balls that were absolute ducks. You know, that's the one thing. Remember, one of the best deep passers that I have ever seen was Randall Cunningham. And, you know, being a deep passer isn't just a strong arm, it's touch. You don't just rifle a deep ball down the field. You have to put some arc on it. You have to drop it in there like a mortar shot, not a rifle shot. And Randall had a way of doing it, but Randall always threw a beautiful spiral. He always threw a perfect spiral, most of the time close to perfect, where the nose of the ball was coming, you know, down or almost straight down, and he would drop that thing over the shoulder where, you know, the receiver could get it and not the defensive back. A couple of these deep balls that Teddy threw were absolute ducks. So if you ask me mechanically what he needs to change, you know, I'm not a quarterback coach. I don't know specifics, but he does need to figure that out. When he's winding up and heaving a ball deep, it can't be a duck. It's got to continue to be, and still be, even more importantly, a good spiral or a perfect spiral. And you're right, he missed, you know, he missed a couple deep balls. You know, he missed one wide open throw to Jennings. I mean, he was off, but he hung in there. And then he completed a wonderful touchdown pass to Jennings later. And that's the difference, I think, with him as well, is that he's mentally stable and tough enough to hang in there and not let what happened to him a series or 2 series or 3 series before, you know, go ahead and affect him into the next one. So I just hope we see improvement, a little more consistency, more accuracy maybe on some of these deeper balls, and, you know, we'll be in great shape.
Well, you know, one of the interesting challenges coming up for the Redskins is they just came off a Monday night game, and you played on a Monday night and then had to travel for a road game 6 days later. As a player, how hard is that to do and play at your best with less rest in the road trip like Washington's going to face?
Well, that's something that I think is going to play in our favor, not just because it's you know, it's a short week, but you're talking about an extremely emotional game against a conference rival, a game that no one thought that they would win, and they went down in Dallas and they beat them. And they probably celebrated that win all the way home until they landed in Washington about 3 or 4 in the morning. So they're almost 2 days behind in recovery. And with that, such an emotional win with Colt McCoy, and now you put RG3 kind of back in there. I mean, RG3 is going to be feeling, you know, he should be feeling good because he hasn't done a whole lot other than rehab for the last couple of weeks. He hasn't been beat up. It's going to be the rest of that group, the rest of the wide receivers and those guys that will be interesting to see. And I think that's another reason that the Vikings, if they can get off to a quick start, you know, that will help them.
As we look at the conclusion of our Vikings mail call, last week we started to ask you a question to get to know you a little bit better. And now that we know that you like both military history and, a sensitive drama occasionally to help you stay in touch with your feminine side, and, when you need a good cry, it's really time to let the fans know a little bit more about Pete Bercich.
Hey, we were 3-5. I had plenty of good cries.
I understand that. Well, now it's a chance to let them find out a little bit more about you. And so I wanted to ask you if you're ready for this week's question.
All right.
Go ahead. All right, here we go. It's Halloween tomorrow night, and what we want to know is if you turn back the clock when you were between the ages of 6 and 13, what was the best Halloween costume you ever wore and why?
Oh my goodness. You know what? It was oh my gosh. That's a very good question. I think as an 8 or 9 year old, when Star Wars came out, I got to be Luke Skywalker. And that might have been the greatest thing of all time, because that movie was it when I was a kid. I mean, that's what it was all about. The action figures, everything. And I think after that, it really went to just pure camouflage and then mayhem all night long. So, Halloween was a good time to get into a little trouble. And if it didn't end up in the back of a police car, it was successful.
Well, that's good. It sounds like that you were more the guy to take the toilet paper and the eggs with you.
Yes, that's exactly right. That sums it up very nicely.
Well, you aren't going to go all health conscious on us at the Bercich household and give out raisins and fruit to the trick-or-treaters, are you? Because if you do, you're just asking for a kid to light a bag of dog poop on fire, drop it at the front door, and ring the bell and run.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Having been on the other side of that, no, of course not. I would never do that. We'll be giving out plenty of the good stuff. Don't worry.
All right. Well,
candy it is.
Well, make sure you save some and send it my way, will you?
Yeah, sure. What's your poison?
Well, you know what? I like an occasional Snickers or a Kit Kat. How about yourself?
There's nothing better than a frozen Snickers bar.
I got you.
Put them in the freezer. Best ever. Cup of coffee. Boom.
Well,
done.
You know what? Just put them outside in Minnesota when the cold weather comes. Just ship them directly to me. They'll be fine.
Oh, you mean like right now?
Yeah, probably so. What temperature is it?
It's only 28.
No, okay. What's warm?
Yeah.
Well, listen, I hope you enjoyed the Halloween with your kids, and with that, we bring a close to another edition of Pete Bercich's Viking Mail Call. And next week, we'll change the format just a little bit. We're going to add a guest to the show with either a fan asking questions of Pete or a special guest from Pete's Playing Days to reminisce with old number 56. And in the meantime, don't forget to follow Pete's tweets during game day on Twitter at Pete Bercich. So until next week, for Pete Bercich, I'm Tom Moore. So long, everyone.